Who makes the playoffs first? The Blue Jackets or your beloved San Jose Sharks?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker of the Reef, also the co-host of Western Conference Tuesdays here at the Locked On NHL channel. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day, or at least 3 days a week right now, as we are in off-season mode. And today we are joined by our good friend Jay from Locked On Blue Jackets, where we discuss kind of the state of both of our franchises' rebuilds. We look at kind of how the Sharks have done it with the burn it down and build it up kind of approach. We look at the Blue Jackets and their inability to maybe get rid of big names in the franchise. And then we kind of discuss who we think makes the playoffs sooner and who's maybe set up for more sustainable success in the long run. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
And we're going to start off by talking about the Sharks, who I feel like Mike Grier got a lot of criticism in kind of his first year as GM. I think the Erik Karlsson trade was kind of underwhelming at first. The Timo Meier trade felt a little bit underwhelming in terms of return. And now you look at the team and you're like, oh, actually, he did a tremendous job tearing this team down to the studs. And now he's got to build it back up, which is a different kind of strength. But what are the early returns looking like on what kind of a job Mike Grier has done in terms of trading away aging contracts, bringing in great prospects, winning the draft lottery helps, but even beyond Celebrini, there's been a lot of guys that look like they're going to turn out to be real gems for the Sharks. So I guess that's my first question: is early returns on Mike Grier as GM.
So yeah, I think especially if you go back to Mike Grier when he got here, I think he was hesitant to kind of tear this thing down to these studs, and but I think he quickly realized it is the right course of action, and it looks like the Sharks are well on their way to one day being a good team again. But you go back to the trades, and some of them I think were better than others. And I think a lot of times there was a little. At the time of the trade, it did feel a little underwhelming, and sometimes, you go back to the Brent Burns trade, which looks like a terrible trade now because they got Eetu Makiniemi, who didn't do anything for San Jose, for the Sharks, let alone the Barracuda. You got Steven Lorentz, who turned out, you flipped him for Anthony Duclair, and then they traded, you have the trade tree for that. And then you got a 3rd round pick, which you ended up trading up for anyway to draft Brendan Svoboda. So that trade didn't feel very, looking back now, you're also in a tough spot with Brent Burns, who had a 3-team no trade clause and had to waive his trade clause to go to Carolina. So a little bit of a tough spot there. But, looking at the Timo Meier trade, right? Timo Meier, at the time, the trade felt super underwhelming. Getting Shakir Mukhamadullin, you got a 1st-round pick. You got a 2nd-round pick that could have become a 1st-round pick. You got Fabian Zetterlund. And at the time, you were like, I don't know about this. But fast forward to now, Fabian Zetterlund had a breakout season last year, scoring over 20 goals. Looks to be a part of the Sharks core going forward. You got Quentin Musty, who fell to you at 26 in the draft, and he's good. I think Elite Prospects had him at the 15th best prospect right now, kind of going into this year. You have Shakir Mukhamadullin, who made his NHL debut last year, but had a really strong season with the Barracuda, was named to the AHL All-Star game. And I think he would have played more NHL games for the Sharks if he hadn't injured himself around that the time of the All-Star break. And then, of course, trading Erik Karlsson, where you end up getting the 14th pick in the draft out of that, and just unloading Erik Karlsson's contract, which would look like for a lot of the time was the worst contract in the entire NHL. You got a useful player, Mikael Granlund. We won't talk about Mike Hoffman at all. And you're probably going to be able to flip Mikael Granlund for something here forward. And then, of course, the Tomas Hertl trade, which I think took a lot of fans by surprise, myself included, at the trade deadline. I thought that was going to be a summer trade, but getting Vegas's unprotected first in this year, getting David Edstrom, who looks to be a really solid bottom six center for you. Like, Mike Grier has done a lot in a very short amount of time, and I think that's the big thing for Mike Grier is he actually has a vision. And Doug Wilson, to his credit, right, he spent a lot of time trying to win a championship, never got over that. But he was still holding on to this, like, I think I have the guys, and he just didn't have the guys to it. And Mike Grier kind of came in and ripped the Band-Aid off. And instead of just kind of wandering the desert like the Sharks did for a couple seasons after their Western Conference final run, he came in here, ripped off the Band-Aid, and now this team is one of the most exciting young cores and one of the best prospect pools in the entire NHL, especially when you factor in Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith and Quentin Musty and Kasper Holtonen and all these guys who are going to hopefully be impact players for the Sharks. So at first, it was a little sketchy, but I think now Mike Grier has shown that he has an idea, a vision, and a plan, and he's executing it.
If you're going to commit to a rebuild, then you might as well, capital C, commit to a rebuild. And that's what's been frustrating about the Blue Jackets the last couple of years is it felt like they were, like you said, they just kind of clinging on to their guys and being like, no, we're close, we're only one step away. So it's really going to be really interesting, and we'll talk about this in the second segment as to how Don Waddell looks at this team, because he doesn't have I guess it's like the sentimentality that Doug Wilson had for his guys. Mike Grier comes in, he's like, I don't know this dude from Adam. Trade,
I mean, well, he played with a lot of these guys, or like Mike Grier, former Shark, right? I mean, I guess he didn't play with, but there's like
there's some familiarity there. Yeah,
there's still familiarity, right? And like you like a guy who traded Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, Timo Meier, Tomas Hertl. Like if you just said that in general, like you'd be like, that guy has got to be hated, right? But he's like below everybody. Like realizes what he's doing and why he's making the right moves. Tomas Hertl is like one of, if not the most popular San Jose Shark in the past 10 years, other than like Joe Pavelski, but like you traded Tomas Hertl to your most hated rival, and everyone's like, yep, that was the right idea. It totally makes sense. Yep, right idea. And you get a unprotected first round pick in this year with a season where Vegas looks really, really, really flimsy this year.
Yeah, Vegas is looking sketchy. Over there, which, can I just say, you absolutely love to see it. Let's talk a little bit about, so we've talked about kind of the work that Mike Grier has done thus far. What's the next step for the Sharks in terms of, obviously they're not going to be good this season, but I think hopes are that they will be better. And by better, I mean not the worst NHL team in the last 30 years. Like what kind of step do you expect the Sharks to take this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think it's just being a more competitive team night in, night out, right? How many times watching the Sharks where it's just like 10 minutes in the game, it's like, oh, this thing is over. It's 3-0 already. Multiple games where you had 2 games back to back where they gave up 10. You had games, especially at the end of the season, where it was 7-1 or something like that. Like the team just was not a competitive team on night in, night out. And you saw Mike Grier this offseason really try to add a lot of pieces to help insulate the top, right? Of course, I think that the big guy in free agency getting Tyler Toffoli, who's a walking 25-goal scorer no matter where he goes. I think he's the perfect winger for Macklin Celebrini, a guy who can do whatever you need to, but his ability to create on the rush, and Tyler Toffoli, who can score on the rush, those guys, that's a perfect marriage for those two types of players. But what the Sharks did on the bottom 6, the Barclay Goodrow whatever on Barclay Goodrow. I've said my piece on Barclay Goodrow a million times. But trading for Ty Dellandrea, who's kind of a younger bottom six, kind of add some grit type of player, and then getting Carl Grunstrom, kind of the same thing. Like, they added a lot of insulation on the bottom six, I think, to help protect the young guys up top and let them continue to play, and then give them some, if there's injuries, as there always is, that way you're not having to kind of do what happened last year. Last year, going into the season, the expectation was to have Tomas Hertl, Logan Couture, Mikael Granlund, and Nico Sturm down the center. You had 0 games with all 4 of those guys in the lineup together. Logan Couture played 6 games. We still don't know Logan Couture's kind of future and what's up with him. But this season they went out. They added Alex Wenberg, who can play center. He can play wing, kind of a guy who wherever you need to slide in. You have Mac Celebrini, who's probably going to be he's probably going to start as the second line center by the end of the season. Is going to be the first line center. Actually, I would probably say by the end of the calendar year is going to be the first line center. You have Will Smith, who can play center or wing. You have a lot more flexibility and maybe a little bit more redundancy, so that way you're not having to have Luke Cunnin center your second line like he did for a good chunk of last year. So I think what Mike Grier did this offseason is he's giving the young guys a runway to learn and get better, but also putting guys around them so it's not William Eklund having to carry Philip Zadina and Luke Cunnin on the line. Like, you're putting these guys in a position to succeed because you have actual NHL talent around them, but still giving them the runway to grow and kind of have the room to grow and eventually be the guys that we expect them to be.
Yeah, it's a really fine line to walk, I think, because like you said, you want the guys to be able to, you don't want to throw them in completely at the deep end, but you want to give them a little bit of protection. I think coaching is going to be really interesting because I think, and again, first-time head coach in Ryan Wasowski, the thing that, again, the Blue Jackets really struggled with, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second here, is as soon as the going got tough, the veterans started playing 25 minutes a night and the kids sat on the bench. And the temptation is there. I get it. You go with the known average
Quantity
instead of the high risk, high reward player, So it's going to be really interesting to see what Ryan Wasowski does with his roster. I'm a huge Ryan Wasowski fan. So I'm really excited to see what he does with this roster. But yeah, as a fair weather Sharks fan, I'll say Sharks fan by marriage. I'm really excited to not watch the Sharks give up 10 goals back-to-back nights in person. Because my fiance and I sure were there for both of those games. But we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to flip the script a little bit here, and then JD is going to ask me a couple of questions about how the Blue Jackets rebuild is going, and then after that, we'll fight it out in who we think is going to be back to the playoffs and back to relevance. First, that's all coming up in just a second on this crossover edition of Locked on Blue Jackets and Locked on Sharks. First, though, I've got to tell you all about Indeed, because we're all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. They are your matching and hiring platform. They've got over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to their data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. You can ditch the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging, so you can connect with candidates faster because your time is valuable. And I personally hate having to go to a billion different places to do one thing. And instead, you can do a billion things in one place with Indeed. And they don't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. I've been lucky enough to not have to job hunt for a few years now, but when I was job hunting, Indeed was the only site that I was using. So I can only imagine it is just as good if you are hiring as when you are looking for a job. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show are going to get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. You need Indeed. Welcome back to Locked on Blue Jackets and Locked on Sharks. We've talked about the Sharks rebuild, how that's going, and it seems like they're doing everything right. even though it seemed like everything was wrong at first. So we're going to
All
flip the
by
script a little
design.
bit. And JD is going to ask me a couple of questions about how the Blue Jackets rebuild is going, because it feels very, very different to, as someone who pays attention to both teams, the Blue Jackets rebuild and the Sharks rebuild feel like night and day.
So what, like you look at the Blue Jackets team who has been drafting very high the past couple of seasons, right? You have Fantilli, you have Ken Johnson, who, where did he go? But like, this team has been drafting really high. Why have we not seen it pay off yet? Why is this team not kind of exiting its rebuild phase into its like fun, frisky phase yet?
I mean, so the ideal is that kind of happens this season is that I'm not looking for the Blue Jackets to be a playoff team this season. My hope is they kind of end up drafting, like what was Kyle always used to call it, like the creamy middle of the league.
Yes, the creamy middle, like picks
I want them to
10
draft
through 15.
Exactly.
Yes.
I would love them to draft either between 10 and 16 this season. I'm not looking for them to make the playoffs, but if they could make it interesting, if they could play spoiler for a couple of other teams in the Metro that are trying to make the playoffs as well, I think that would be fun. The problem is that, we talked about it in the first segment. Mike Grier committed so hard to the rebuild that he sent every beloved Shark he could to somewhere else. The Blue Jackets were kind of reluctant. The quote unquote fall from grace was really fast. They went from, they had Bobrovsky, Panarin, and they brought in Matt Duchene for that 2019 playoffs where they finally won a playoff round, in the famous Tampa Bay sweep. The next season, they played spoiler to the Maple Leafs, kicked them out of the play-in round in the bubble, but that was a team that wasn't going to make the playoffs if COVID hadn't screwed everything up and created this kind of play-in round,
Yeah.
And then the season after that, they were miserable. That was they drafted. That was the 5th overall. They got Ken Johnson in the first one. The next year after that, they got David Jiricek. They got Denton Matejchuk. Season after that, Adam Fantilli. Season after that, Ken Lindstrom. So four drafts in a row. They've drafted top 6. It's been tough. But management has seemed like management has not been on the same page as everyone who has been watching this team. And I think as much as I've enjoyed watching Johnny Gaudreau play for this team, that might have been the worst possible thing to happen for the team at this point in time, because what it did was you bring in a big money star and you're like, right, okay, the window is now. We are competing now. And then everything fell apart. And it wasn't Gaudreau's fault. It wasn't necessarily bad roster management or bad this, that, or the other. Everyone was injured that season. Literally everyone. The goaltending was miserable. They lost Zach Werenski 13 games in. There were games where all 6 of their defensemen games added up did not equal the amount of games that Ryan Suter had played by himself. So that was they fought an uphill battle. And then so we're like, okay, next season we'll probably take another step back, but it'll be fine. And then they go out and they add Ivan Provorov and David Severson. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here is Jarmo Kekalainen is desperately trying to drag this team into the playoffs, whether because he thinks his seat is hot, whether it's because he's got pressure from ownership to have this team start to win games again. But it's kind of like putting masking tape over a crack in your windshield. It's not gonna help. It's just kind of making things worse and dragging out this rebuild. And if the Blue Jackets aren't careful, then what's going to happen is we're going to see the same thing that we saw for the last 10 years with, for example, the Buffalo Sabres, who have been rebuilding for 1,000,000 years. The Coyotes, who've been rebuilding for 1,000,000 years. The Ottawa Senators, who their rebuild has been over for 6 years, I guess, but they keep... Anyway, we won't get into that. So it's just really frustrating that if they had just done what Mike Grier had done 3 seasons ago and ripped the Band-Aid off then, we'd be in a much better place. Would we have Johnny Gaudreau? Probably not. But without Johnny Gaudreau, then we would have been even more miserable. Might have ended up winning the draft, there was, I'm probably getting my draft years mixed up, but they probably would have been in the mix for the Slavkovsky / Shane Wright pick, or even, I would take Matty Beniers in a redraft. No question. First overall, they would have been in the mix for Connor Bedard. They were kind of in the mix for him, but, that didn't. Basically, they held themselves back 2 years, and now they should be, because they were bad before the Sharks started being bad, I feel like.
Yes.
But now I think both teams are kind of at the same-ish place where, okay, we've torn it down. Now we have to start building things back up. But the Blue Jackets should be one, maybe 2 seasons ahead of the Sharks, and they aren't. And it's kind of because of impatience to win, to not do the rebuild. They tried to fast forward through the rebuild, didn't work. And then what's the word I want? Reluctance. Kekalainen likes his guys. He didn't want to get rid of his guys. They should have done what the Sharks did, and they didn't. And now it's kind of, we'll see what happens with Don Waddell, because new guy doesn't have that sentimentality, doesn't have that familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to be like, right, well, goodbye to you. We kind of saw it with all of the guys that left this summer, but will that produce results? Who can say?
Are you worried that this team ends up becoming like the next Minnesota Wild or LA Kings, where they're good enough to get into the playoffs, but they just get in and then they just lose the first round every year, and they're kind of stuck in that cycle of, again, the creamy middle team where they're just like, you have good talent, you have Fantilli. Kent Johnson I still think is a really good player, and maybe now with a new coaching, new regime, maybe he finally unlocks. So you have really high end, I think, defensive prospects, but do you have enough? That's my question, is do you have enough guys? And especially as we're gonna talk about kind of the playoffs here and who makes it first, but you look across kind of the rest of your division, right? Philly's in a weird spot, but New Jersey, right? You're going to have to beat New Jersey. You're going to have to beat Carolina. You're going to have to beat these other teams, and we'll talk about this more. But my worry is, again, since they didn't commit enough, that they're just going to be that team. Just we get to the playoffs, maybe we're feisty for a round or two, but just never enough high-end talent to put you over the edge. And I just crushed you. You can see the exact
yes,
moment.
And also no. I'm worried about that, but also because I have anxiety and I'm worried about everything that happens every second of every day. But I think the difference is, and Minnesota's a really good example of this. Of when was the last time Minnesota drafted top 6 4 years in a row? They've been mediocre to average basically for the last 10
They're
years,
the creamiest of creamy middle team. I told
they are the most mid team. Sorry to Seth, we love Seth, but it's the Minnesota mid, Minnesota, there we go, I got there. LA's kind of a different story, but again, they drafted Quentin Byfield 2nd overall, and I want to say Adrian Kempe went 9th overall.
But Greg Clark was 8th. They have high end players, but
not in the same way that it's been consistent, miserable play like it has been with the Blue Jackets for the past 3 to 4 seasons. So they've done more than that. That's not my worry. And again, the Blue Jackets have had so little playoff success that right now I'm kind of hey, let's get to the playoffs. Let's get to the playoffs in back-to-back years, and then we'll start worrying about winning a round. My worry would be that they kind of turn into more of the Sabres, where I feel like every single year since maybe since 2015, maybe even since I first got into hockey back in 2013, it's been, man, are the Sabres going to be good this year? And every single year they aren't. It's the Modern Family JPEG of, well, it hasn't happened with anyone else, but it might happen with us. And so that's my worry, is that we get into this cycle of next year we'll be good next year, watch out next year. The Metro Division is a really interesting one to kind of look at, because I will we'll get back into this in just a second. We'll talk about playoffs. in this special Locked On edition, Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Sharks.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you now. Through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So if you're like me, I live in California, but my beloved Dolphins play in Florida. So I have to struggle sometimes to get Dolphins, not with YouTube TV. I get my every Dolphins game every week right there in front of me. So, and with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook.
We're back with Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Sharks, and we're talking about who's going to be back to the playoffs first. So I'm just gonna finish my thought on kind of the Metro division, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of what the path to the playoffs looks like for the Sharks. Because the Metro is in a really weird space at the minute because most of the big teams for the past, let's say, 10 years are kind of on a downward swing. You know, the Penguins are looking like they're on the way out. The Capitals are desperately crawling along, attached to the shambling corpse of Alex Ovechkin.
All they want is Ovi's record, and then they're just going to burn that thing.
So they're refusing to rebuild. You know,
yes.
In like 2 seasons, the Capitals are going to be the worst team in the NHL, which is going to be really funny. But you know, New Jersey's on the way up. Philly's kind of in a weird spot right now. They, I think, are kind of in a relatively similar position to the Blue Jackets, where it's probably time for them to start taking a step. Michkov is going to be a really interesting add to just kind of the division as a whole. Carolina, I feel like, could go either way. The Rangers could go either way. They'll probably be one of the better teams in the division. The Islanders are older than God, so I'm not expecting a ton from the Islanders. And there's definitely another team in the Metro that I have forgotten.
No, you got them all.
Did I get them all?
The Rackets.
Nice.
Yes.
So you know, the Blue Jackets, it's there for them to take. You know, they've done the drafting. They've done the arguably the easy bit. They've collected all of these good young players. They need to take steps forward, and that's kind of up to, do they have the coaching? Do they have a GM that is willing to, like with the Sharks, to surround these kids with serviceable NHL players?
With easy off-ramps. I think that's the thing, too.
Yes. You know,
easy
like
off-ramps
short contracts, not signing someone with a lengthy injury history to a 5-year contract. I've mostly Stockholmed myself into the Sean Monahan contract, but if it doesn't pan out, it's gonna be a rough contract, you know. But what about the Sharks? So like for the Blue Jackets, the Metro division is kind of opening up a little bit. If they have a good season, they can kind of jump in. How do the Sharks pan out? Like, how do the Sharks match up against kind of the rest of the Pacific Division?
The rest of the Metro.
How do the Sharks compare to the rest of the Metro Division?
Well, really quick. So my thoughts on the Metro. So I think like the Hurricanes are like the Rangers are in their kind of window right now, and they're going to, as soon, you know, in the next couple of seasons, kind of take a step back. The Hurricanes are in a weird spot because they're good, but they also have like an amazing prospect pool. So I think they're one of those teams that can just kind of continue to be good because they can just supplement young players in, like young good players in around their star players. So I don't expect, if they can ever figure out their goaltending, like actually a real goaltender, they might actually be able to do it one day. But I think the Islanders are very happy to just be a let's make the playoffs type of team, like you said with the Caps, whatever. But like the Flyers are a weird team to me because they feel like a team that didn't fully capital C commit to be bad enough to continually get at, and maybe they're trying to thread the needle on this, you know, the reload or whatever, but I don't buy it. I hated what they did in the draft. They're a team that you wonder if them being good last year could have been like the worst possible thing for them, where maybe they set themselves up for future failure. So I think and then the Devils, who have all the talent in the world, but need to, again, can you be consistent? So I can see where Columbus is. They're still a couple. I think they could be that fun frisky team this year, but I still think they're a couple seasons away. As for the Sharks, looking at the Pacific, right? And you have like Edmonton, as long as Connor McDavid is there, Edmonton is going to be good, and we'll see what happens with Draisaitl and how they have to continually manage, these massive contracts and building around them. And
Draisaitl's going to be a really fun San Jose Shark in like 2 seasons.
We'll see about that. Vancouver has been a team that kind of that, like, you're waiting for them to do something. They finally did something last year, and I think their players are still young enough, and if their goalies just don't die for them, like, I still think they're going to be a competitive team for the next couple seasons. The Kings, like we talked about earlier, I feel like they're that, like, this is a big year for the Kings where if things go poorly this year, this could be one of those blow it up type of teams because of Rob Blake's. I think he rushed the rebuild. I think he rushed the rebuild with them.
First, folks.
I think but then, like, you look at the Flames, I think they're my hot scorching hot take for this season is I think the Sharks are going to have a better record than the Flames this year. You have the Kraken, who are kind of in that weird, again, maybe them making the playoffs 2 seasons ago might have been one of the actually bad things for the franchise because you tricked yourself into believing you're better than you actually are not. And the Ducks will one day eventually, hopefully, maybe start the world's slowest rebuild behind the Buffalo Sabres for them. So I think for the Sharks, like the path to be more competitive, I think is a bit more wide open than the Blue Jackets, just because I think there's a lot more bottom feeder teams right now. And then I'd even talk about Vegas, who we talked about earlier. While they're the most aggressive team in the NHL, at some point the credit card comes due, and you've seen that as a Sharks fan. We saw that, right? A team that competed for the Stanley Cup for 15 straight years. Eventually the credit card bill comes due and you have to start this thing over. And they're a team that I feel like they're one Jack Eichel, Mark Stone injury combo away from being really bad. I don't know if you've looked at their left wingers. It's not good. So I feel like for the Sharks, the Pacific could be one of those divisions where 2 years from now, we're looking at a much different combination of players in it, especially if the Anaheim Ducks finally take their step, and some of these other teams take it back. And I just think it's just a weaker division, which gives more chaos theory approach for the Sharks where, I think I can see Columbus hitting the playoffs first because I think they're slightly ahead. But I think for the Sharks, I think they're set up for a much longer sustainable run of success, and that's been kind of my key talking point is sustainable success, right? You don't want to be the flash in the pan. You make the playoffs once, like the Kraken, and then what happens the next year? You fall apart, right? You want sustainable. Like, how do you build this thing up where kind of like Colorado did, right? Okay, you're making the playoffs, and then you're going deeper and deeper, and then until you finally win it. And I think the Sharks are set up for that sustainable success, especially after winning and celebrating. And then you're going to go into this upcoming draft with 2 first-round picks, including the unprotected first-round pick by Vegas. I can't get over it. I cannot get over it. So, it's. I think the Sharks are set up for longer, sustainable success. I could see Columbus sneaking into the playoffs first, but I think the Sharks are going to be a more relevant team before the Blue Jackets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I do kind of agree. The worry with the Blue Jackets is that, like you said, they are going to be that flash in a pan. Like New Jersey is a really interesting situation to mirror because I feel like the Blue Jackets are kind of on a similar-ish path. You look at their draft history from, what was it, like 2017 to 2020, 2021-ish.
Yep.
Where they drafted, they had back-to-back first-round picks, and then They got Luke Hughes at 4, Simone Nemec at 2. Like they had better draft luck than the Blue Jackets, but they were in a similar position. And now, like you said, lots of young, good talent. Can they take that next step? They were really great a couple of seasons ago, fell off a cliff this most recent season. Can the Blue Jacket, the worry is that the Blue Jackets do the same thing. And, again, I genuinely wouldn't be shocked if they are very, very good this season, like unsustainably good, despite all underlying metrics, and then fall off a cliff next season because like I said, it was unsustainable. So like it's the Sharks are doing it the right way, and I do agree. I think the Blue Jackets will be back to the playoffs first.
Yeah.
I think the Sharks will be back to the playoffs more. The Sharks will, like you said, more sustainable success. I don't know that the Sharks will have more playoff success when it comes to like just the nickels and dimes of it, of like, okay, in the next 10 years, how many playoff series will the Sharks have won versus how many will the Blue Jackets have won? But I wouldn't be surprised if the Sharks have they win a round, they win 2 rounds, they win 3 rounds.
Yep.
Whereas the Blue Jackets, probably they win 1 round, they win 3 rounds. They win 1 round, they win 2 rounds. I feel like the Blue Jackets might be set up to have a little bit more inconsistency in their success. But I think, I don't know, both teams are really exciting. And we didn't really get a chance to talk about prospect pools or anything like that. But they have similar-ish prospect pools, I think. I think the Sharks overtook the Blue Jackets this summer. But hey, I mean, picking up Macklin Celebrini will do that. The Blue Jackets obviously had Adam Fantilli graduate from their prospect pool, but both teams are very fun and exciting young teams. And I think fan bases of both teams should be, I don't think either team is going to be a playoff team this year, but they're going to be the fun, bad teams. They might lose, but they're going to make it exciting.
Just no, I can't do any more like 7-1 losses night in, night out. Just just be fun. That's all I ask. Just be fun.
That's all we ask. We would like our teams to be fun. We ask for so little.
Just be fun.
If people want to learn more about the Sharks, get more into their rebuild, stuff like that, where can people find you and your show online, JD?
Of course, you can follow the show wherever you get podcasts, and you can watch on YouTube as well. By Timmy Diz, I actually did a kind of Will Smith, what to expect out of the Will Smith, who kind of feels like the forgotten guy a lot of the times after Sharks drafted Macklin Celebrini. So talking about Will Smith, what to expect for his first season. So we'll have that. Could also plenty of CUDA coverage as well. With again, love talking prospects because I don't want to actually talk about the real San Jose Sharks. So follow along wherever you get podcasts. You can also follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at MyFryhole. Jay, where can people find you, buddy?
So for the first time in a long time, I don't actually feel bad recommending that people pay attention to the Blue Jackets, which is something that I have felt bad about doing for the past 3 seasons. But anyway, you listen to Locked On Sharks, you can find Locked On Blue Jackets there. We do daily Blue Jackets coverage. We also cover the AHL team quite a lot because, again, the Monsters are more fun than the Blue Jackets on many different steps. But you can follow the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me at _Jacob Forster, JAKOB And we want to thank you guys for making this your first listen of the day every single day. We are both continually free and available on all podcast platforms, on YouTube, on Sirius XM. We will have a new episode for you in a couple of days, or separate episodes, not the same. Tragically, this is the one customary summer off-season crossover between these two teams. But until Friday, make sure you stay locked on.